and welcome back to Truth in Time as we step into Europe's great crucible. World War II in Europe was a clash of armies, ideas, and impossible choices under fire. It began with lightning advances. The German strategy called Blitzkrieg swept across borders in quick strikes. Poland fell under the weight of coordinated armor, air power, and shocking speed in 1939. Western democracies watched in alarm as borders shifted and old assumptions about war evaporated. The Battle of Britain followed, an aerial duel between the RAF and the Luftwaffe for control of skies. London endured the Blitz while fighter pilots fought to keep invasion from becoming reality. The air war taught nations that industry, radar, and morale mattered as much as firepower. In June 1941, the war widened catastrophically with Operation Barbarossa, Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union. What began as a campaign for territory became a grinding, ideological contest of survival. Moscow, Leningrad, and the steppes became scenes of endurance, strategic depth, and immense human cost. The winter of 1941-42 and logistical strain stalled the German tide, signaling strategic limits to Blitzkrieg. North Africa mattered too. Rommel and Montgomery clashed over supply lines, oil, and Mediterranean control. El Alamein marked a turning point where Allied persistence began to roll back Axis momentum abroad. But the true pivot in Europe came with Stalingrad, a bitter urban battle that bled the Wehrmacht dry. Stalingrad proved that city fighting and Soviet resolve could turn strategic initiative into catastrophic loss. The spring offensives and Kursk's massive tank battles further exhausted German reserves and morale. By 1943, the Axis faces had shifted from offensive to desperate defense across multiple fronts. Meanwhile, in occupied Europe, underground resistance movements grew, risking everything to sabotage and save lives. Partisans disrupted transport, relayed intelligence, and embodied civic refusal against occupation regimes. Their courage forced moral dilemmas. Civilians faced reprisals for resistance activity, often with tragic consequences. Allied bombing campaigns intensified, aiming to cripple German industry and morale from the air. Strategic bombing raised ethical questions about civilian casualties and proportionality that historians still debate. Cities like Hamburg and Dresden burned under massive raids, stirring controversy about military necessity and suffering. In 1940, a decisive operation unfolded. D-Day, the Normandy landings, opened the Western Front in force. Allied soldiers crossed the English Channel under horrific risk to establish a foothold in occupied Europe. The Normandy campaign proved logistics, deception, and joint command could overcome heavily fortified defenses. Operation Bodyguard's deception plans and artificial harbors illustrate how strategy and creativity shape outcomes. From Normandy, the Allies advanced across France, liberating towns and provoking fierce German counterattacks. Operation Market Garden sought a bold, quick end but faltered, showing daring plans can also fail spectacularly. As armies moved east and west, supply lines, weather, and industrial backing determined victory's pace. Autumn 1940 brought the Ardennes counteroffensive, the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's desperate game. Allied resilience and timely reinforcements blunted the attack, restoring momentum toward Germany's heartland. The slow encirclement and collapse of German forces in 1945 reflected material shortages and strategic exhaustion. Cities fell, soldiers surrendered, and the map of Europe changed irrevocably as the Reich crumbled. Yet alongside battlefield narratives lay the continent's darkest moral catastrophe, the Holocaust's systematic crimes. Millions of innocent civilians, targeted for extermination, suffered under industrialized murder policies, a moral abyss. Liberation revealed concentration camps, corpses, and survivors, forcing the world to confront genocidal brutality. Allied troops faced moral challenges in documenting crimes and caring for liberated civilians and prisoners. The aftermath demanded legal reckoning. Nuremberg trials sought to hold leaders accountable for crimes against humanity. Those trials established precedents about individual responsibility and the illegitimacy of orders as absolute defense. Wars ushered in urgent reconstruction, displaced millions, needed shelter, identity restoration, and legal protection. The Marshall Plan and similar programs aimed to rebuild infrastructure and stabilize war-torn European economies. Reconstruction also required confronting collaboration, purging fascist structures, and re-establishing civil institutions. Democracy's restoration involved delicate choices, lustration, trials, and pragmatic reconciliation in fragile states. Cold War tensions quickly replaced wartime alliances as Soviet Western divisions hardened across the continent. Borders shifted, nations were divided, and the Iron Curtain symbolized a new geopolitical order emerging from ruin. Writing about World War II's European theater requires balancing military narrative with moral introspection and empathy. Historians examine not just operations, but the human choices under pressure and how institutions responded. Command decisions involve trade-offs between military necessity and civilian protection, choices still judged by history. Resistance fighters sometimes forced harsh reprisals. Commanders faced impossible choices about acceptable loss. Strategic bombing's morality remains debated. Was it a brutal necessity or an avoidable tragedy? The liberation of camps revealed failure to prevent atrocity despite intelligence and warnings, a moral failure to weigh. Reconstruction policy choices, who to punish, who to rebuild, shaped post-war political cultures and identities. The war accelerated ethical reflection on sovereignty, genocide prevention, and human rights architecture worldwide. From the ashes rose new legal frameworks. The Genocide Convention and human rights instruments aimed to prevent repeats. War also transformed military practice, combined arms, logistics, air power, and intelligence matured into modern warfare. Technological advances, radar, code-breaking, and mechanized armor changed how future conflicts would be fought. Yet technology could not erase the moral fog that accompanies wartime decisions and civilian suffering. Veterans returned with physical and psychological scars. Communities struggled to memorialize sacrifice without glorifying violence. Memorials and museums across Europe now carry stories of courage, loss, and complex memory politics. The European theater's lessons include the importance of alliances. No state alone could defeat Axis aggression. Coalition warfare demanded diplomacy, shared logistics, and sometimes fraught compromises among allies. Civilians played decisive roles. Factory workers, medics, and ordinary citizens sustained home fronts under hardship. Women's labor and participation altered gender roles and social structures across the continent long after the war. The war foregrounded ethical leadership, transparency, restraint, and respect for human dignity matter in crisis governance. Accountability after conflict proved essential to rebuilding trust in institutions and preventing cycles of revenge. The European experience shaped post-war integration efforts, eventually feeding into processes like the European Union. Economic cooperation, security ties, and shared memory aimed to bind former enemies into a durable peace. The theater's moral dilemmas continued to inform debates about intervention, humanitarian aid, and wartime conduct today. Military historians study campaigns for tactical lessons. Ethicists study decisions for moral accountability and learning. Documentaries, survivor testimonies, and scholarship keep alive the human stories behind casualty counts and territorial maps. Teaching the war requires sensitivity, honoring bravery while acknowledging suffering, and complicity when present. Remembering avoids simplistic myths. Many individuals acted heroically. Others betrayed or failed. And structures sometimes enabled crime. The European theater's arc, conquest, resistance, collapse, and rebuilding traces human resilience and institutional limits. It also shows that law and moral norms matter. Unchecked, power produced atrocities that required legal redress. Memory politics shape national narratives. Some countries confront painful pasts, others sanitize memories for identity. Public history projects aim to present complex legacies honestly, encouraging critical civic reflection across generations. Wars did not erase trauma. Rebuilding required truth-telling, reparations, and inclusive narratives for healing. Historical study also informs modern policy, preventing ethnic cleansing, protecting civilians, and upholding international law. The European theater reminds us that military success without moral clarity leaves unresolved wounds for decades. We must study both battles and the human consequences that followed to grasp the full meaning of that era. As citizens today, we can draw lessons about vigilance, the fragility of democracy, and the costs of hatred. Commemoration should inspire responsibility, resist scapegoating, defend rights, and support institutions that uphold dignity. World War II in Europe changed borders and lives, but its deepest legacy may be the moral questions it forced upon us. History asks us not only to remember facts, but to apply lessons so future generations may choose differently. Thank you for watching Truth in Time. If this exploration moved you, like and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Tell us, which turning point in Europe's war surprised you most? The Blitz, Stalingrad, or D-Day? Share your thoughts below and help keep these lessons alive for the next generation of citizens.